Hello. Thank you for joining us for today's Ask the Pet Food Pro. I'm Lindsay Beaton, editor of Pet Food Industry Magazine and host of the Trending Pet Food podcast, and I'll be your moderator today. Ask the Pet Food Pro is a series of expert chats brought to you by Pet Food Forum and the editors of Pet Food Industry. You can find our content at petfoodindustry.com. Most Ask the Pet Food Pro chats address a specific area of pet food manufacturing, formulation, safety, or the like. But today we have a special edition, the second of a two-part series on mentorship. This specific series is brought to you by Women in Pet Food Leadership, a program that connects and empowers women and allies in the pet food industry through events like this, plus mentorship and networking. We also have two sponsors for today's chat. Thank you very much to 3D Corporate Solutions and the Peterson Company for their support. This session features a distinguished duo of women leaders in pet food, Leah Lambrakis, Vice President of Research and Development for Nutrition and Scientific Affairs at Simmons Pet Food and Simmons Animal Nutrition, and Leanne Sayan, CEO of the Peterson Company and founder of Blendco LLC and Whippet LLC. Before we get into our discussion with them, I have a few announcements. First, you've all been muted to ensure everyone can hear and focus on the discussion. Please submit any questions or comments you have into the chat box. Some of you submitted questions beforehand, which we really appreciate, and we'll try to get to as many as we can along with the ones posted today. Finally, this chat is being recorded. You can access the recording starting in about a week at petfoodforumevents.com. Click on the About tab at the top of the page, then select Ask the Pet Food Pro from the drop-down menu. Now, all that out of the way, we are going to open up our panel discussion. To start, I want to talk about some of the benefits of having mentors throughout your career. Leah, let's start with you. I want to know, what role has mentorship played in helping you find or strengthen your voice in the workplace?
Thank you, Lindsay, and thank you for inviting us to this panel. Super excited to collaborate with Leanne once again. When it comes to mentorship and finding my voice, I think about it two ways, not only mentors in the formal way, or maybe I didn't even know there was formal mentorship early in my career. I thought it was just people being really generous with their time and advice, but it's also observing people early in my career path and my career growth, really observing how effective leaders, their ways of working, how they took action, how they led. And I think in a lot of those ways, those are little mental notes I took. But specifically to mentors, I think for me, relative to strengthening my voice, early on, I used to think it was I needed to speak up and have the answer in the room. But I've learned that it's really about knowing your value and communicating your value to the conversation, most importantly, with intention and clarity. Several mentors shaped that for me. One specifically really showed me how to prepare, how to organize my thoughts so I could really speak with purpose and not just be reactive or jumping in, trying to be part of the conversation. And part of that was my ability then to learn, how do I claim my seat at the table? So not just physically being there, but intellectually providing dialogue that was meaningful to the audience, backed with insight. And that was me, even most recently, using a tool I learned of just, and I've talked about this before, but even just practicing the pause, right? Taking a moment to reflect, how do I come into this conversation thoughtfully, intentionally, not reacting? And I think that adds a lot of validity to my voice at the table. I'd probably end my response was saying, most recently, I had a professional coach that really tried to instill what she called the 3 C's: clear, concise, and compelling. And I write that down all the time. I think about it as I'm entering a conversation or a meeting. And I try to coach my team and my mentees on that. It's, again, gaining that seat at the table and bringing validity to what you have to say. Try to be clear, concise, and compelling. And one of the best things she told me is start with the punchline, because I think technically sometimes we tend to get into a lot of the details and we'll lose the audience. But if we start with the punchline and then backtrack how we got there, I think you catch everybody's attention.
Now, Leah, you ended with a specific example. So, Leanne, I want to ask you to give a specific example of how a mentor has supported you through a major career pivot or leadership leap, because that's a time when having a mentor can really make or break a decision-making process.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And much to what Leah was saying, mentors come in various ways, and just reflecting and looking back on that without naming that in my past, as I had an opportunity to prepare for today. It was really enjoyable to think back on those that had shaped my career and helped through those specific times of big shifts, which for me, as I thought about it, was making the leap from being an employee of the Peterson Company to purchasing the Peterson Company. And I needed to lean into several mentors to help me to propel that decision. And some of that was financially oriented, not just what the support that I needed to make that leap and to build my confidence, but also to build my confidence in financial knowledge and to make sure I was making the right decisions there. And as I thought about that and what those individuals provided to me, it's so funny that Leah used the word clarity, because that also kept recirculating for me. And clarity of thoughts, clarity of how I would bring my talents to the table for a better company that would fulfill our core values, that to make sure I was part of the greater good at a corporate level and for the team that I would lead, and grounding myself, and that I had mentors who helped me to ground my talents to make sure I was in alignment with moving forward with that decision. And at the end of the day, they were like the catalyst for my confidence to do it. I knew I wanted to do it, but I thought, maybe do I have to have all the right things done and buttoned up? And part of what they helped me with is, you have the confidence. It's going to be scary no matter if you answer every question that comes into your mind. Lean into the fear. And as long as, again, you're in alignment with the values and continued leadership in alignment with that, go for it. I will always be grateful to the group of people that helped me to get there.
I want to continue on that path with you a little bit further, Leanne, because there are a lot of questions when it comes to mentorship, and we had this in part one as well, about what makes a mentorship relation successful and what can make it fall flat. You've just listed a whole bunch of things that can make it successful. What would have made things more difficult for you during that process if you had the wrong mentor?
Yeah, so I think if it becomes performative, if it's more of this relationship that must happen instead of one that is propelling both the mentor and the mentee to different lines of thinking, different questions, different why, how would we do this, really helping each other and utilizing each other's experience for a better outcome. That's the beauty of a really good relationship, I think, between mentor and mentee, and that it could flip itself at any moment, that it's not so linear that one is always the mentor and one is always the mentee, that there's a challenge amongst each other. But if it had not been pushing me, or if we'd just been meeting or having dialogue because we felt like we had to, but there was no challenge of thought, that would A, not have been a good use of time, but B, I don't think would have propelled me forward. So I think always feeling a little uncomfortable and a little bit of a push and a little bit of, I'm not quite sure where we're headed, or it's thought provoking or making me think deeper, that should exist. Otherwise, it's a cup of coffee with a friend.
Exactly. If I may add to that, I think that's the first thing that my very first mentor asked of me when we started the cadence, is that coming to the table with an intentional conversation we want to have, it holds us accountable. And then it really shifts it from a casual conversation to a professional conversation. And I took that to heart, because for him, he says, how this serves me is to see that I'm actually helping and there's true guidance and coaching happening here, not just having a cup of coffee or meeting for lunch. So if we meet back again in next month and nothing's really changed from what we've talked about, for him, he says it no longer really serves me. And I've tried to do the same thing with my mentees, is come to the table with an update since last time, a question of where do they need help navigating something, or maybe a challenge that they brought to me and needing some feedback. I think it just holds us both accountable. Otherwise, like you said, we're just having coffee.
Leah, do you think mentors need to be in your field, or can you find them outside of your field in a related industry or just in another stage of career that doesn't quite match what you're trying to do?
I don't think they need to be in your field. I think there's definitely benefits of subject matter experts coaching and teaching you and mentoring you at different points in your career. But I also think you can get a really valuable mentor outside of your field. Actually, the coach that I just talked about, he wasn't in the pet food space or science at all. He was actually the head of foreign exchange at a national bank, but I sought him out because through observation, I had learned and seen that how he led, how he could drive results, how his team really respected and followed him. I wanted to learn some of those skills and how I could be more of an effective leader. And he was the one that coached me on how to gain that seat at the table and know my value and bring my value to the table. And so I think there's benefits both ways, whether it's an internal person within your company or within your field certainly gives you that level of perspective because it's relatable to you and it's relatable to them. But someone outside of your field, I think, definitely pushes you to broaden your thinking. You learn about different cultures, different experiences, and that person sees you, not just your role. And I think that that could be really beneficial as well.
The both of you are talking a lot about something that I think is really important to find in a mentor, especially when you're at the beginning of your career. Things about boosting confidence, and you haven't said the words yet, but imposter syndrome and all the things that especially when you enter a new career or you're transitioning to a new phase, can really make you pause. And it would really help to have somebody boosting you. And so I think it's a very important quality in a mentor. Leanne, do you have any moments when a mentor helped you reframe self-doubt into confidence? Because we all experience it at one time or another.
Yeah, and so again, preparing for this and thinking back on my career, just to contextualize for the group that's on with us today, I joined the industry in 1999. I came into a family business that was pretty small at the time and joined my dad in business. So not only and I had a lot to learn. So not only was it an industry I didn't know, I held on to a lot of self-doubt, imposter syndrome, whatever, thinking, are people imagining that she's just getting a handout, joining the family business, that the intention for real work and knowledge isn't there? And I needed help to get past that. Not only did I have to reframe my own self-doubt, which is the work of life in many ways, I needed those around me to hear my story, to be a space for me to talk that through. And absolutely, what they encouraged me to do was to share my success stories with them and then reflect on that they were success stories. And even if they were failures, to see those as opportunities for growth. I was thinking about them and learning and growing. Having a space to tell your story, to be able to say where your self-doubt rests, to know that we've all been there at various stages of self-doubt and imposter syndrome, and then to say, great, let's talk about what you have accomplished and reframe that whole conversation in a way that is seeing it through the lens of confidence building, expanding skill set, learning where those failures come. I had a number of people, I'm sure some of them are on this call. I know for sure Leah is. And I had moments with her where that I very much appreciate, that were growing moments for me. I don't think I necessarily came forward and said, I'm carrying this self-doubt, but we had opportunities to work together where I felt very encouraged and useful and like I was contributing, walking away from it. So it can come in big, very intentional ways, and it can come in small doses also. And I really try to hold on to that as I think about how I'm interacting with people in my life, but in my career, particularly women who I think can hold on to this more than others sometimes. But really everyone, and the conversations and the little things that are said are meaningful.
Leah, I want to ask you pretty much the same question about imposter syndrome and on the later side of things, because now you're in a position where you probably mentor quite a bit. You have enough experience now that you can guide other people through different phases of their career. Have you ever intentionally mentored someone through their own imposter syndrome? And how do you approach that situation?
Absolutely. I see it most often in really talented women and men who are really hesitant to see their own awesomeness. I and we see that a lot. I do see that a lot among my team, my peers, my mentees. I think the first step is listening and sharing my own experiences, because I certainly went through a lot of what Leanne just described very early in my career. I think being relatable, and I think showing that individual that you see them, you hear them, and you understand, that just builds trust right there in that relationship. And then they know they're not alone. I know so many hesitate to say those two words, imposter syndrome, but I think really it just comes down to self-doubt, uncertainty, and questioning whether they can make it happen. So grounding them in truth of their skills, what they've accomplished, the why, the wins, the impact that they bring to the business or the subject or the meeting that they've been invited to. I think grounding them in all those truths and saying, you've got this, and this is the reason you're here. And maybe reframing their thinking and saying, this is not about proving anything to anybody. It's about you owning what you do and what you know and why you're here. And the best part is, typically almost 100% of the time, after they've been through that hurdle, come out of that meeting, did that speaking event, or had to report out on an initiative, they're so excited about how they showed up. So it's just reinforcing that they've got it.
And if I could just add one thing, then when you move into more of that confidence, I think there can also be I don't know if a roadblock is the right word, but it can be difficult to then be an advocate for yourself. Like, how do you share the successes that you've had? It's that fine line of, am I bragging, or how do I share what I've learned and what I've done in a meaningful, ongoing way? And I did have a person say to me once, and it really stuck with me, if you can think about sharing those wins and successes as part of telling your story, it's a storytelling exercise, because it does become very meaningful. How are you going to move up? How are you going to obtain the promotions? How are you going to find yourself at the right company in the right spot that fits you? And I think as you develop your story and incorporate those wins and successes, and think of it more as an exercise of that, as opposed to just laying out all the wins, that really becomes a powerful way to advance yourself and to grow in your own confidence in that way too, and to present it forward.
Where do you start to look for a mentor? Let's say someone is either at the beginning of their career or they're at a transition point and they really feel like they could use somebody to bounce something off of. How do you figure out what type of mentor you need? And what if the mentor you're thinking of is somebody you don't know well? Is it just ridiculously awkward to even try to open up that conversation? Or do people just need to pull the trigger and go for who they think is going to help them best, even if, they're just an acquaintance or they just know them through industry channels?
Either of us? I can start if you'd like. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is awkward. And I think you've got to put a lot of thought into it. When I reference my first mentor at that time, I called him a coach, mostly because I needed specific coaching on specific topics that I think he personally brought expertise to. I had thought about a few people at that time, and without them even knowing it, I was interviewing them in casual conversation, and then made a decision to actually approach this one individual and asked if they would be generous with their time to share experiences and insights and some guidance on some specific areas that I was looking for. He was very flattered, and that's when that relationship was established on how he sees this as a successful mentorship. I think you need to find someone who sees you and not just the role that you're in, understands you. You probably should share similar values, and that this person is genuine, and it's about also giving their time to you, and it's not about ego, and it's not about trying to prove anything. Sometimes you're just not going to have the answers, and I've been in that place with conversations where I've said, I'm not quite sure, but let me think on that and I'll get back to you. But I think the other thing is that you really want to find someone that is a good fit for you and that will be honest and give you feedback that could be hard to hear, and someone that truly cares about your growth and your development. At the end of the day, it's someone who believes in you and you think has the kindness and the generosity in their time to give back.
What do you think, Leanne?
Oh, sorry, my dog is barking. Can you hear that? Yeah. Okay. I echo Leah's comments 100%. I think also that coming into it intentionally with really so that you can lay out for a person that you may want to approach to be a mentor to you. I think putting thought into the expectation of what you want out of it. What do you need from them and what do you hope that they can provide? And also what can you bring to that reciprocal nature of mentor mentee is just so important. Otherwise it can become more of an ego driven thing. And so I think looking for that right fit with intentionality, with the idea of reciprocity is good. I'm going to get my dog. Okay.
Hey, if a dog's going to bark, it might as well be during a pet-focused panel.
I agree.
Aw,
We're back.
excellent. All right, we now have an extra panelist to answer questions.
Yes.
So I want to use the second half of our discussion to get a little bit more granular and give some practical advice, some career advice to people both on the mentor and the mentee side of things. So like how to be a good mentor, how to be a good mentee and get what you need out of the relationship. But one of the things that comes up a lot is, and we've been talking about it, it's been an ongoing thread throughout both sessions of this particular panel, is communication and the difficulties in making your voice heard in the industry, especially when you're younger in your career. Leanne, I want to start with you and your co-host. What advice would you give somebody who struggles with self-promotion or advocating for themselves in meetings or reviews?
Yeah, so such a good question. And again, I would come back to that. Can you flip it from how do I exert my power to how do I tell my story? But also, it's been interesting at knowing that this event is coming. Coincidentally, I've been reading this book called Likeable Badass, which I would recommend to anyone on this panel. It's really, I think, intended for women, but we need men to read it too. The outcome of that book is really that women, right or wrong, have not only a power dynamic that they need to exert as they're looking for advancement in their careers, they also have to be thoughtful of their status and how are they perceived and how do they build the perception that others have of them, and being conscious of that. And at the end of the day, know thyself. You don't have to be anyone different than you are. You just have to spend some time to know authentically who you are and how you show up in your career and in your space, and then tell your story. And really, I think that when that authentic individual comes forward, it's amazing what doors open, I believe. And so that would be my advice. I know it's murky. It's spend time with yourself and who you are, but there's a lot of different ways to do that. I'm no guru on that. Some of it is just life experience and reflecting on it and being thoughtful about where was that a win, where was that a failure, as in an opportunity to grow. But where did I bring my authentic self, and where did I try to be something that I'm not? And then weave that into who you are and the outcomes that you want, and have clarity in that communication. I think that's the path forward.
And Leanne, I want to continue this by asking you the flip side as well. As a mentor, how can you model or encourage confident communication, especially in environments where people feel uncertain or like they're underrepresented at the table?
I believe the most important thing, as Leah has already said, give space. And it's okay if somebody is feeling a little tentative. They just need space to be able to get their thoughts out, and they will get there. And to not jump in with the answer. It's okay to be uncomfortable and to support someone being uncomfortable, because really growth comes out of that. So I really try to intentionally leave space for, I may be pushing you for an answer that you're uncomfortable with, or a comment or a contribution, but I'm also very good about sitting back. I'll help you if you need help, but also just give it a go a little bit. I'm also a big believer in, so I've grown up with this mantra: prior planning prevents poor performance. But if somebody really has a big moment, whether it's I don't know, a speech or something big, or preparing for an event or whatever, it may be silly, but say it out loud to somebody a couple times. We've certainly had people who have advanced throughout the Peterson company who started in a space incredibly uncomfortable. Super, let's set aside 30 minutes and let's just model it. Like, it's amazing when you can just say it out loud once or twice, the confidence that it can generate, because usually it's in our heads where the issue lies. So being supportive, making space, not defining somebody by one moment, but by how they push themselves to step into their true selves. All of that, I think, is the best that we can do to be supportive of each other. And that goes both ways.
Leah, I want to ask you a question about networking, because in order to even be able to find a mentor or to make yourself available as a mentor, obviously you want a network to get your name out there or to be able to work through to find the mentor you need. How would you advise people to maintain or grow their network when they are coming up on a career transition or another reason they might feel like they're in particular need of a mentor?
Yeah, growing your network as part of your career growth is so important, regardless if you're in a transition or just in your role today. We've used this word a lot, both Leanne and I, but I think it has to be done intentionally in building this network on your own, and then it will start to grow organically. And it doesn't have to be, both of us started in 99, it doesn't have to be that many years to grow that network. I think if you're intentional about it, it can happen fairly quickly. But building relationships, and I feel really blessed. I think one of the big reasons I'm where I am today is the network and the relationships I've built within the pet food industry. But send a note, reach out. I'm still the old school nerd that writes handwritten notes, even in this very virtual remote world. But I think even that little personalization leaves an impression on people. But it's also networking, not just networking up. I think it's networking across as well, and at all different levels within your industry, whether it's suppliers, manufacturers, consultants, customers. finding some commonality with people and saying, hey, I'd love to grab a cup of coffee and talk about that a little bit deeper. People like that. People like the connection. And we go to a lot of these trade shows, all of us, and it's fast and furious. But at the same time, taking time to get to know someone a little bit deeper, I think opens doors for you because people will remember that. And when an opportunity hits, they'll say, hey, I've got someone for you, or I just met someone that's interested in that. So I think if you're going through a transition specifically to your question, it's beyond your resume. I think what resonates with people is how you made them feel and how you showed up. And being, again, intentional about it goes a long way.
I think it's very interesting that so much of this conversation so far today and the last panel we did has focused well beyond just technical skills needed for a job. Nobody's really asking for a mentor on like how to be a better researcher or how to be a better marketer. It's very much how to be better overall, how to have a more fulfilling career, how do I build these relationships within the industry that are hopefully going to carry me through the decades. When you're trying to build a career, that's the stuff that really matters. And I think it's been very interesting in how that has come out in these conversations about mentorship, and that so much of the focus is on communication and relationship building. I think it can also be difficult to look into the future when you're starting out or when you're either at a transition point or you've been at a certain point for a while. I think it's easy to just stagnate and get caught in the day to day of things. Leah, how do you think mentors can help mentees learn to think beyond their current role and contribute more strategically? Obviously, you have to focus on the day-to-day stuff, but if you're trying to have a career, you always have to be thinking ahead. And I think that can be very difficult for people in the day-to-day.
I think as we're earlier in our career, we're much more maybe task driven, project driven. And I really try to encourage my team specifically to think beyond what they're doing and think, how does what they're doing solve a bigger problem, let's say for the business? And so thinking broadly, having them zoom out and look at the bigger picture to understand the why and understand why their work is so important and for the business in total, or the initiative or the problem again that we're trying to solve. And it helps them understand the broader business goals, right? So taking the opportunity to learn those things, asking the questions of their peers, their leadership, even something as simple as, I'm in R&D, but I don't really understand the financials that come out every week. Can someone sit down and explain the scorecard to me? And something like that just helps connect the dots to understand why their work is so important. And I think also being present and listening. I think we're all guilty of what I'm about to describe, but I have the ability to sit in a lot of cross-functional meetings. And for me, I've learned the best way for me to grow strategically is to pause and just listen to what's happening in that meeting, which means putting my phone down, shutting my laptop. In fairness, I take all my notes now on my iPad on OneNote, so it might look like, but because I know for myself, I think I'm multitasking, but I am not absorbing what's happening in that room, and I'm missing things. And I think pausing and really listening to the conversation, whether it's someone in finance speaking, operations, sales, it all helps you connect the dots and think more strategically, and then makes you stronger as you grow in your career. And frankly, it's just respectful to the people holding the meeting, and it shows if you're not paying attention. So I really encourage my team and mentees to take advantage of every opportunity they have. If they're invited to a meeting, or they can attend a webinar or be part of a conversation that's a little bit outside of their total area of focus, it really does broaden their strategic thinking and their growth opportunities for sure.
Leanne, do you have any other strategies for developing long-term thinking and just making it a habit so that you're not even consciously doing it anymore? You're just always in that mindset from the start.
Yeah, I do think, much like Leah said, asking that question why is always a good first step to broaden that thinking. I also think if you have somebody, formal mentor or someone that you can check in with those when issues emerge, when there's problem solving, even if it's not your solve to bring forward, if you can think to yourself, how would I have solved that problem? Would it have been different or not? And then you can check in with somebody as to where your thinking lies with the organization. That can help to start to address systems. And what you're really talking about is, how do I take myself out of the task? And how do I start to think more systematically how this organization works and functions, and what do they hold themselves accountable to and for? And so checking in where you see, again, if your decision aligns, that's also good to check in on. Do you think this person made that decision because of this? But also, if you see it really differently, and you can check in with somebody and say, I would have done this. Why didn't that decision happen this way? That can be as powerful, if not more, a way to learn how the systems of an organization work. And then you're really tapping into culture and potentially identifying ways to make it better. If you bring that thought forward and the individual says, hey, maybe they didn't think about it, but I think your solution is awesome. Now you're starting to contribute meaningfully to how the organization operates. Yeah, it's just it's moving away from the task and thinking about the whys and benchmarking yourself maybe with a trusted person on how you see it differently or similarly.
You just mentioned something, Leanne, that warrants a follow-up question as to how to do that. You said that if you have an idea, you can bring it up. You don't have to be a long-time seasoned employee. You don't have to be management. If you have something that you think would benefit the company, you should feel free to run it through the channels. I think that's a very intimidating prospect for a lot of people. How From either one of you, has there ever been a time where you were in that position where you thought you had an idea and you really wanted to run it up and you had to overcome the idea that it was just really intimidating? What do I know?
Yeah, so I would answer that two ways. Intentionally, we create spaces for that here. That may not be every organization. So you have to find what works in your organization. It doesn't have to be a blast of an email. Hopefully, you can identify somebody who again, loosely you consider a mentor that you could check in with very specifically. This is what I saw happen or heard, or this is how this flowed. This is my idea. What are your thoughts about it? That's a very private way to check in. If you want to do it a little more publicly, which maybe there is the time and the place for that, I think then you have to also be receptive to the fact that somebody might say, hey, that's a rabbit hole. We're not gonna, and again, it's not, that is meaningful feedback too. If you bring something forward and someone says, that's not exactly where we're headed, and they can say why, and we're not going to head down that path, great. You also just got feedback that helps inform future decisions. It's a little that finesse of finding the right space and what's comfortable for you. I'm personally a more private person. It would take a lot for me to check in a public space because I always feel like I don't have all the context. So what don't I know that has led to this? But I'm also not shy about finding the people that can help me fill in those gaps. And if I still feel really committed to that, like, I still think there might have been a better decision here, then you start to float it through those channels.
I would agree with that. I will say, and I'll do a little bit of a plug for our company, but we believe it should be a no fear environment, and that we operate that there's always the possibility of doing something a better way, right? And so in the spirit of continuous improvement, in the spirit of innovation, in the spirit of just doing things more efficiently or more effectively, sometimes it's okay, just not sometimes, it is okay to ask the question maybe nobody's asking. It doesn't have to be in the room. To your point, Leanne, it can be privately to your leader, to your peer, to maybe the leader of that department that you were thinking about. It might not be even in your own area, but I think it can open doors. It might be something that is put in a parking lot for later on, but I think at the end of the day, it allows your voice again to be heard, no matter what channel or environment, but that will resonate with people as well. That, hey, Leanne's a really inquisitive person, and sometimes she's got some thoughts that we should pause and listen to. And I think there's value to that.
I think it can be very easy to get into your own head about things, and that can hinder your ability to progress or to transition in your career. How have you guys, on both sides, how have you been mentored in a way that helped you get out of your own head and progress? And then as you have transitioned to becoming mentors, what advice do you have for people about how to get out of their own heads and get out of their own way?
I think I've progressed, but I'm still there. I was literally told yesterday by a very senior leader that I've probably thought more deeply about this than what the average person would. And that was just their way of saying, I hear you, but you're taking this too hard. You're thinking about this too deeply. And my response was, it's just who I am. And I've never been able to get out of being that overthinker. It's just innately who I am. But what I have done is been able to not fester on the things that are not in my control. And my team and I just talked about that this morning. I don't want the team putting energy and thoughts and creating a swirl about things that are not in their control because it's an energy drain. And I think today, in such a fast paced environment, and a lot of pressures are on us. We have to think about what's an energy giver and an energy taker in our world so that at the end of the day, we feel like we had a fulfilled day and that we made a difference. And coming back tomorrow is just as exciting. I think a lot of people have the ability to step away and say, that's not in my control. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm still a work in progress in so many parts of my life. And I was given that same advice yesterday. I don't know if I answered your question, Lindsay, but I'm still learning.
By you,
The
Leanne.
only thing I would contribute to that, because I think many of us professionally are overthinkers for sure, obsessive thinkers, whatever you want to call it. It's a thing. For me, sometimes just saying it out loud, like to somebody, which could be a mentor-mentee relationship or could be just in my office preparing for today. Prior to getting on here, I was saying things out loud to nobody, to Gia. But then you start to, does it resonate? Is it authentic for who I am? Is that really what I want to say? Words can demystify what's going on up here to a certain degree. So a little, and that can, again, can be with somebody you trust to give you feedback or can be to yourself for your own self to give you feedback. Just it's different when it's said out loud, I think. So there's tricks to helping to facilitate that. And then I also would say to Leah's point, and hopefully for myself also, overthinking, I think, can sometimes be, or being in our heads. I don't know. I don't want to go on too much of a feminist limb, but is that attributed to women in particular? I think we do think about things, not that we're different than men. I just think part of who we are, not biologically, just environmentally, we think about a lot of things because the consequences are significant. And at some point, we have really good thoughts. And if you've checked in with yourself and this is meaningful and it's got to get out of your head, you have an obligation to your company, to your team, to your peers to filter through what's really meaningful in that quote unquote overthinking and getting it into the public domain to make those spaces better. And I think men do that with ease, more ease than women often. And I want to see, like, when a woman speaks up, I want to hear what they have to say because I'm pretty sure I'm going to enjoy because they've thought about it for a minute and it's probably going to be very impactful. So I know it's easier said than done, but I would also say if you've given it the proper weight and it's contributing to the greater good, get it out there because it's going to be received well.
I want to transition to the mentor-mentee relationship because a couple questions came in prior to this event about it, and there's also one in the audience right now. Have you ever had to break up with a mentor or somebody you were mentoring? How can you tell if it's a bad relationship from either side or that it's just run its course?
I absolutely believe that a mentorship relationship can have a natural season. And Sometimes it's simply that the purpose has been served, whether it's growth, guidance, support. Like you said, it's simply run its course. And I think it's just checking in with yourself and asking, is this still serving us? Are we still learning? Are we still growing? Are we still challenging each other in the right ways? And if the answer is no, then maybe it's time to shift and step away. And that's okay. I think it's just doing it with kindness, with honesty and transparency, and expressing your gratitude, and maybe take it further and explain all the ways that relationship benefited you and how you apply a lot of those practices every day. And then say, hey, I'd love to check in every once in a while and maybe meet up for a coffee. I think that's totally fine.
Yeah, and I also think some thoughtfulness about going into a relationship. If you know what your goals are and they're stated, and if there are none, being thoughtful about that too, because it probably means it's going to be more difficult to identify when it has run its course. But the relationships should run their course at some point. And I don't know, breakup seems a little bit rough. Maybe I'm sensitive because my 18-year-old just broke up with her first boyfriend and everyone seems to be a mess right now. Like you came together to learn and push each other in some capacity. Unless it's very strategic, I guess that's probably going to run out at some point. And then you're going to have new skills and new challenges that require somebody else who can share what they've been through in that way. So it's a good thing if it's run its course. It means you've evolved to a spot where you need something different.
Have either of you ever recommended a new mentor to somebody who you were mentoring, or, told them that they should reach out to somebody else for this next stage or for a particular issue? Can mentorship be a group project?
I've done something similar, but I had it on my mind for that individual, but I checked in with the person that I'm recommending first. Just like someone saying, hey, do you have this person's phone number? Check in, can I give your phone number? Only because I want to be respectful of people's time. I think being a mentor and entering into a mentorship relationship requires the investment of time. And having just the courtesy to say, hey, are you interested in chatting with this person? And that's happened to me as well, where someone has reached out and said, I'd like to recommend a mentee if you have time. But yeah, I've done that. I haven't done a group mentorship, but I have said, here's someone who I think you could really gain some valuable insight from. And they're open to it. So I've opened that door and then I've left it at that.
I've turned down opportunities, and they really are opportunities to mentor, only because of lack of time, which is heartbreaking because I feel that I've received so much in my career and life. But also to say that you can do it and then not give it justice is so much more of a disservice and could really be crippling to a confidence builder, I think. I've tried to be self-aware of that and say no where it's warranted to do so.
As we wrap things up today, I want you guys to think back to an early mentor you had early in your career. What do you wish you had asked them earlier? What do you think could have set you up just that tiny bit better? Obviously, you're both doing just fine, but there are definitely some things that can ease the way that you only realize when you look back.
I think for me, I wanted to be able to be the solver of all the things. And early in my career, I worked tirelessly to meet those expectations or be the resource that people would come to, only to realize it was exhausting me. And at the same time, my inability to say no early in my career was a hard learning for me later on. And I feel like that is the advice I now give to my own team, of really taking a step back and thinking about, is this something that you should be solving, or is this something someone on your team can help you with? Let's delegate, so on and so forth. So I think I said it earlier that even just using my voice, I used to think I had to speak up to show my value. But then I realized you don't always have to speak up. You know your value and know what you want to bring to the conversation versus just saying anything. I think the same is with your time. Know the time you have and the energy that you want to give to the things that are really important versus all the little things that drain you and you don't even realize that you're drained until you're really drained. And I wish someone told me that earlier. I don't know if I would have done it any differently because I was just eager to please, but I would say that's where I wish someone gave me that little bit of coaching.
Yeah, and for me, I would say, and I think actually my mentors did tell me this, even though I didn't specifically ask, and I'm not sure I was open to hearing it, but what are the blind spots? What don't I know that, and whether it's professional or personal or a combination thereof. And as I reflect on it, they gave me nuggets of that, but I just, because you don't know what you don't know, I didn't quite connect the dots. So maybe being more thoughtful around understanding the experiences of the mentors around me and knowing that it's likely a portion at least of those experiences are going to touch me at some point, and what don't I know at this current state of my being that they've already accomplished. But I'd love to ask them, because I think if you asked, they'd have to give thought to it, and that might be interesting also, but I never did ask that.
I want to thank you both for being on the panel today. This has been a great series in general, and today has been an excellent conversation about both sides of mentorship and how it can help you in your career. To our audience, please watch for future digital offerings from Women in Pet Food Leadership. We also have other virtual events on pet food coming up, plus some in-person ones too, including a mentor mingle at this year's Super Zoo show in Las Vegas. The event will be held on August 14th. We're still in the planning stages, so be on the lookout for more information between now and Super Zoo. We'd really appreciate your feedback on today's chat, so please scan the QR code on the screen to access the survey. We're also going to be emailing a survey link soon, so if QR codes aren't your jam, you have another chance to fill it out via email. The recording of this chat will be available in about a week, also on petfoodforumevents.com under the About tab. That's also where you can find part 1 of this series. And last but not least, thank you once again to our sponsors for today's chat, 3D Corporate Solutions and the Peterson Company. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day or evening, depending on where you are in the world, and your weekend.